first off, you have a podcast that is focused on D&D. It's a horror podcast, and you have Jeff Goldblum showing up. How did this all come about?
I'm not really even sure. The dice find a way is kind of what we've been saying. Dice finds a way. But it's very strange. I'm not connected. We're not connected to anyone, not related to anyone. We had inquired, and we were not told no. And that's really the confusion from all parties involved. So that's really what we've got.
That's so excellent. What is what is the adventure? What is the character that he will be playing?
So our first season focuses on adventurers going into the woods to rescue some children. They more or less do stuff. Stuff happens. They fail. So it's them trying to recover from the end of what happened and their failures. And one of the team members got separated, and not under the nicest of circumstances. So it's a quest of sort of revenge. And his quest intersects with some other people who are in these woods called the Dead Pines, where bad things happen. And Jeff's character, he's Balmur. He is looking for his daughter's locket when one day he's captured by a different group of elves who are, they want to sacrifice him to some sort of strange thing, and he's not wanting to be sacrificed. He likes his head on his shoulders. So it's a story of revenge, survival, and we're trying to kind of have the idea that we might have two groups of player-controlled parties, one hunting the other. It's interesting.
Yeah, that sounds extremely exciting. What made you decide to reach out to Jeff Goldblum to be on the show?
I love Jeff Goldblum. That's the short answer.
That's already just a valid reason.
It hadn't been done. It seemed like something he would really like. The story that we've got for this one in particular seemed like it would be one that would interest him. I had thoughts that this would be something that might make him smile. The people we've got involved are really fun, and it seemed like a really good time. And he, I guess, agreed. That's how we find ourselves here.
Did you have to go through a character creation process with him? What was that like? Was it surreal?
So it was interesting. I deal with a lot of first-time people, and when I invite anyone to the show, I give them here's an idea for a character. If you like this, we can use this. Or you can make up your own thing, throw my idea out, and go with whatever you want. I would love that. But he liked the idea that I'd thrown out there. I've done a lot of research on the people that I work with, and I think through things, and I kind of build a character sheet that makes it really easy for people to play and really just focus on really the storytelling elements, and I handle a lot of the mechanics with them. So on the back end, it's okay, roll the dice. All right, I'll add it up and kind of make it quicker, streamlined. So I try to make things as easy as possible for anyone who guests on the show or becomes a main character on our show, for that matter. And it's been a fun process. The previous season also dealt with some really weird stuff where we had kind of a werewolf situation of a doppelganger who kills the characters, and then that character is now playing the doppelganger, but the other players don't really know because I've been passing the messages, and everyone's remote recording, so they can't see the messages. So it's been fun.
Yeah, and so this is so you're kind of expert at teaching people D&D at this point, then, since you've had multiple guests on this show.
It really comes from my home games and having them constantly fall through, and having to make new groups every time and trying to make it as fun as possible for new players. So I kind of extend that into the podcast a lot and just trying to make it fun for people. That's really the goal. And as a horror podcast, and with our goal of not being for us to have fun necessarily as goal number one, but also to make sure that our audience is having fun. There are some additional things I need to go through with consent and okay, I know you're genuinely scared of this thing and I plan to use that. Is that okay with you? If not, I can write it out of the story. But I try to do a fair bit of research on the people I work with, who are usually obscure indie podcasters or friends. And it's been a lot of fun to incorporate those sorts of things into our stories and create very real moments.
And is it already pre-recorded? Have you already gone on this adventure?
We have. We've actually recorded multiple, seasons worth of stuff, as it were. We've got we basically record in 6-hour blocks, and we do a couple of those as a normal show practice. Because our show wasn't supposed to be a show. It was supposed to just be us having a one-shot campaign, but they didn't die. The players didn't die as quickly as I wanted, and they kept living. And that's because it was just sort of like a fun team-building exercise for the other podcast we do, The White Vault, which is another horror podcast. Just the cast, we were supposed to do a live show, and had never met any of the actors. We're like, all right, icebreaker, let's play D&D. And that was how this all sort of started.
So is he starring in only one of the episodes, or is he like a full cast member for multiple episodes?
Oh, he's with us. Jeff is with us.
Oh, he is with you for like how many episodes of the podcast?
I wish I was a lot more professional and I could give you an exact number, but I edit them. I'll actually be editing the show up until it's released. So I would like to say maybe 7 or 8, but it could be shorter. I kind of change the episode lengths based on what people have been feedbacking, or if there's like, oh, this is a much better break because the song that we just finished, because we're actively working on music for the story as well. It's like, oh, it's a good spot to stop it right here. So sometimes I'll stop it at like 20 minutes, but usually we're around 30 to 40 minutes an episode, but they can change.
What was it like running this adventure for him and for this cast?
It's a really fun cast. We have some really seasoned DMs on the cast, and they're comedy DMs. And I'm trying to run a horror campaign and keep this together with Jeff, Peter Lewis from No Sleep, Sean Howard from The End of Time and Other Bothers, which is hilarious, and Russ from Dungeons and Dragons, and Holly from The Lucky Die, and trying to keep a serious face and trying to keep things grimdark, and it was a challenge, and it was a very fun challenge that I uniquely enjoyed as a DM. Very gratifying. And I also pre-wrote a lot of the descriptions, so it was extra easy, because I do that for everything I do, because I'm sort of not very visual. So I write, okay, but then they decide that every time this party always decides they want to go the opposite direction of where I want them to go, because just to spite me. So it became like this double, like, oh, you guys shouldn't go south. Like, oh, he wants us to go south. North. It's awesome.
Yeah, tell me about the cast of characters that we will be seeing, and what kind of world is this? Is this your own homebrew D&D world?
Yes. We do a lot of, the first season basically takes place in an isolated setting, like a yawning portal. It could be in any D&D world almost. We'd actually reference some Forgotten Realm stuff, like deities and such. But as we've grown a lot, and as we are looking to expand our stories, we've veered away from that. We've spent about 8 months redesigning and developing and keeping quiet on this season, while we worked on building our own world, which is basically set in my homebrew world that I've been running since I was 6 years old. So there's a lot of silly things there that are still present, but it's evolved and matured a lot. And I've worked with some fairly very smart consultants on the project for things like disability representation and diversity, and even a reptile breeder to try and make our dragons even a little bit more quirky and strange. But like Jennifer Kretschmer, she's wonderful, and she has a quote that she said something to the effect of, in a world where humanity is not the apex predator, which is what we've got dragons running around, it would be ridiculous to think that, it would be fantasy to think that there would not be disability as a very happen common stance. At least, 30% of people would be disabled. And it's like, wow, you're right. This is something that really should be addressed more in a fantasy setting. So we're very much about those sorts of things, but it's a homebrew world. At this point, it's a lot of fun, and it is a grim one where humanity isn't at the top of the food chain, or elves even. There are monsters at every corner. People are afraid, and they're trying to survive these dark terrors, and banding together in cities and villages and towns so they don't get taken away into the night.
And the show has a very high bar for quality. Like you have music made. Like I can already tell you prepare a great deal as a dungeon master. But being a podcast, you have to really, come correct. You really have to give it your all in terms of sound and in terms of design. What all do you do?
I'm the editor, producer, sound designer, music director. I write the lyrics. I write some of the songs. Coming from someone with a music background, and then COVID happened. So it's like, okay, what can I do with music? It's like, okay, aha. I can put this into our podcasts. But I make podcasts for a living as a sound designer for my wife and I's other show, The White Vault. And it's a lot of fun for me to sound design things. So when we record the episodes in 6-hour chunks, like I'd mentioned, usually around 6 hours, and then that's like a lot of content for us. But it also gets cut. So there's a first cut where we cut out all the, I don't want to say table talk because there's a lot of fun things that we keep, but okay, this requires a Constitution saving throw. Okay, I'm rolling a dice. D20, right? Yep, D20. All right. I rolled a 5 plus 3. All that gets cut. So it's just much sharper, much quicker. And then from there, I have a lot of like info drops that I give players. I try to like text them to the players and they can read them out loud, but sometimes it doesn't quite work out or they miss the text because, again, we're all in different countries, different time zones while we're playing, and lag is a thing. So I'll edit out my exposition and just say like, hey, could you please re-record this long info drop I gave you on history and just take it from your character's perspective. And the characters will do that. And it sounds much better than me just talking for most of the show. So there's a lot of like back and forth and some improv even after we've recorded, sort of added on to it. But we keep the actual moments of the show. The dice rolls are very final. Certain characters should not have died as quickly as they did in our first season, and I'm still really hurt about that, that they had to no longer be a part of our show. But we try and keep those moments, and then after that first pass, we have a transcriber, which is our player, Hem Cleveland. She's fantastic. She's from the Lucky Die. She's known as Rowena on the show, our bard. And she transcribes the entire thing, and then I'll go through and give everyone their pickup lines. They'll re-record the pickup lines that we kind of need, where I'm not just info dropping stuff, or they'll react to visuals instead of me describing things. That's fun. It's more fun than hearing what it looks like from the character. It's much more fun that way. And then I'll add sound effects, layers. We recorded the whole thing, so I know what the music needs to be when we need music, and usually for combat, because that's the most boring part for me, is the combat. So I have a couple of music friends that I work with, primarily Stephen Malin, who's a composer. I've very much enjoyed working with Brandon Boone from the No Sleep podcast, who does all of their music. David Wise has joined us, Donkey Kong Country. The writer for that video game franchise and many more, will be writing some music for us fairly shortly. And then Enzo Pizzovio, who is this European historical reenactor, Renaissance man who plays over 200 medieval instruments that are real. And he plays hurdy-gurdy for us, and hammer dulcimer and a bunch of other things, marina tromba, and whatever else he can just sort of shoehorn into the songs we've got. And then for the lyrics, because we have, thanks to Stephen, access to a choir sometimes, which is really cool and unexpected. I write these lyrics in Infernal and with Eithor, who is one of our lead actors, Icelandic, which we use as our Dwarvish language because it's really close to the ideas. And it's a lot of fun. So that's basically in a nutshell what we do. And then Marissa Ewing makes it mixed, because I'm not a good mixing engineer because I'm actually partly deaf in one ear. So it makes for a much better mix than I could possibly make. And we have the show and we release it as soon as it's done pretty much, and freak out under the wire trying to get one out every month while doing everything else we do. And we're fully fan funded by Patreon, which is also really crazy.
What is it that you love about D&D? Because clearly you have to. Like, how did this begin for you, and why do you love D&D so much, and what makes this kind of art form unique and special for podcasting as well?
I love storytelling, and I love being a part of stories, and collective storytelling in itself is also a particular type of storytelling which happens to be one of my favorite. I don't know the outcome. As the storyteller, I don't know the outcome, and that's very interesting and exciting. And nor do the players, and none of us really know where it's going, and it's much better than anything I could write or create. But even if it wasn't recorded, I enjoy playing games and telling stories. I've been playing again since I was about 6 years old, and the Satanic Panic happened, and I lost a couple of friends to that, and it really wasn't fun. But I kept playing and made new friends, and my D&D world evolved, and the history got a little bit deeper every couple of years with the players doing crazy things. So it's really a way of life for me. I enjoy telling stories, and this one happens to be one that I really enjoy, and I'm working with some really talented people like Hem, like Eithor, like Peter, Sean, and Jeff, and Holly, and Russ.
what can people expect from this new season?
Ooh, you can expect some dark stuff. So I'm into horror. I like horror. So we do scary stories, and it's going to be immersive. It's going to be spooky. There is some comedy because our team is by nature humorous sometimes because they're comedy people. So lighthearted, but also very deep conversations. I'm getting into the abstract stuff. The specifics, though, we've got some very scary monsters for you. Again, I prey very much on phobias that are my own. I have a condition called face blindness, and it means I can't recognize people's faces, and it's very upsetting for me. So the idea of a doppelganger that steals faces is very upsetting for me. And our good friend from season 1 is known as the Silent One. It's a legendary creature that steals people's faces and voices and messes with them, as I'd mentioned before, and it isn't dead. And that's very problematic. We also have another large, big bad monster, which we haven't really talked much about, and it's a very real threat to the world. I also like the idea of kind of a player versus player adventure where we're hunting another group of players and seeing things from different perspectives. As a DM, we use a sanity mechanic. It's really a stress mechanic, but sanity sounds more cool. But it's a stress mechanic where the more stress the party accumulates, the less reliable the information they get from me is. And they take it very serious, like, oh, that's definitely the truth. So it's we'll be seeing some very similar events from different perspectives, and the audience will try and figure out what's really happened and what's really real as the characters and players try to do the same and resolve those differences.
What are the tenets of good horror storytelling? Because we've got a book coming out actually in D&D, Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, which I'm extremely excited for because I'm a big Ravenloft fan going way back. But how do you approach horror in D&D? Because you're right, like it could either be too much, too scary, or it could be too comedic sometimes, and it's such a fine line, to find that sweet spot for the players and for you, but also have a safe space at the same time. But like, what makes horror fun for you?
What makes horror fun? I would say there are a lot of descriptor things that we like. We often think in terms of visuals, but we have 5 senses, and some characters have more than 5 senses. Being extra special and inclined toward magic or the divine. So playing with senses that aren't just sight are a lot of fun. And it can lend itself to being a more real experience for people who aren't very visual like myself. I can't imagine things in my head at all. I simply have a blank mind whenever I close my eyes. So hearing like, oh, I can imagine that sound, or oh, I can imagine that smell. Different things, can really affect people in terms of senses. Great horror is also suspense. So, okay, you encounter, 3 ghouls. 3 ghouls pop out. Okay, well, that's less scary than describing the ghouls and not saying they're ghouls. Aha. So, descriptive. Taking a lot of time to describe things can really make for a very fun adventure. I don't think we've actually name-dropped monsters, though the players are like fighting 5 zombies. It's terrifying because the zombies are viscerally disgusting or scary or creepy, and we don't really know what's up with these extra little pieces that are in those descriptions. So it's not just a zombie, but every time it tries to rake its face across the player's chainmail, it's leaving this black ichory trail, and we don't know if that's poisonous or toxic or if it's just a zombie. But it's much more fun not knowing, and the mystery and kind of being immersed in the moment, and having buy-in from your players ahead of time or people you're working with on it. Is also very helpful. Letting them know this is like a haunted house. We're going here to be scared. It's okay to be scared. It's going to be fun. If we cross a line, we can stop, and that's fine, or we can use an X card, or there are many other tools. But our goal here is to be scared, to tell a scary story, and to make it through the other side unharmed. The players are unharmed. The characters may be dead or scarred for life, but that's kind of a lot of the things that I find fun for horror, and keeping people guessing what could be, and then also leaving things open-ended. One of the characters had no backstory. We just left it a question mark, and I kept hinting at 4 different directions it could go, and he took it in one of them, and it was really fun to see where it went, because I didn't know. And all things were true until he made a decision. So that's been fun.
What because you introduced Jeff Goldblum to D&D, which I can only imagine. Like the minute I've been a giant Jeff Goldblum fan for a long time, but he was so perfect in Thor Ragnarok as that character. I could see him in any D&D game. I feel like maybe like Thor: The Dark World is the campaign that people think they're going to run, but Thor Ragnarok is the one that you get, because it has all those comedic bits in it, and those are kind of the characters you end up having no matter what. But he seems so perfect for the D&D multiverse. But you teach so many people D&D, and I expect a lot of people are watching this video because they're interested in, like, hey, why is Jeff Goldblum playing D&D? What would you say to the people watching now? Like, why should you get into Dungeons and Dragons? Why is this a passion? Why is this like it's a great time? I don't think there's been a better time to get into D&D than that, right?
I'd agree. Basically, it's really simple. I made some new friends when I was living in Portland, and they said, "Oh, we don't want to play D&D. It sounds very tough and rulesy and elitist or something." And I said, "No, just give it a try. We'll see what happens. It's really a storytelling experience. So we're going to sit in a room. The rules are actually fairly simple, and if you don't focus on the rules, or you have somebody who can just handle all that for you while you figure it out and walk you through it and explain it as you go along, it's really more about like experiencing circumstances that are not your own and exploring a bit about what you like or don't like within these characters, walking a couple kilometers in someone else's shoes as a dragonborn sorcerer, or as an elven ranger with an animal companion in older editions. So you can get to like experience these different things, even though in a really safe space among friends, and enjoy wonderful stories and share experiences together and make lifelong friends. And that's, I know that sounds so idealistic, but with the right people, that can be the circumstance. And it's happened quite a few times for me. And I'm really grateful for those experiences that we've shared.
Can you spoil anything from the season? Like, not necessarily a spoiler, but something that may surprised you, because you are working with so many wild cards in this, including Jeff. Do you have a favorite moment?
I have so many. I can say a few things. So player deaths happen in our story. People roll poorly. I roll generally the most poorly out of everyone, so you'll hear me cursing or complaining in the darkness as monsters fail to look impressive. And then I have to like justify it with back. Oh, you were so good at dodging every time. It was a bit of a nightmare for me because I was introducing the new big bad, right? Or it will happen at some point. There will be a big bad getting introduced, and it failed 6 out of 6 rolls. And then I was like, well, okay, it's got an ability that all the players can be affected by. They all succeeded every time. So literally, I just completely whiffed every possible way to hurt the players or do anything imposing at all, or even like influence them in subtle ways. And I have to like justify why that happened now. It's just like, okay. And that was, and going through that and improving that and trying to explain it to the players, like, and coming up with different reasons why it would fail each time, with this really impressive quasi-deity thing happening. And it was very comical on all possible fronts.
Where can people find the podcast? You are on your 2nd season. Again, that's correct. How many episodes are in the 1st season? And again, like, where can we find this? What are the dates? And how do people get into this adventure?
Yes, the episode will come out May 12th. Whether or not I'm through editing it, it'll be out on May 12th. Season 2, episode 1B, or chapter 1B, we call it chapters. But season 1 is available at darkdice.com, or if you look up the word Dark Dice in Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to podcasts, we're there. It is 16 episodes. Episodes are between anywhere from 10 minutes, but really realistically more closer to 30 to 50 minutes. They're fairly short by the D&D TTRPG standard, and it's really worth checking out. Come for the horror, stay for the hurdy-gurdy. It's a good time for all, and the editing quality is really good. And we also like to recommend a lot of other shows on our show. So if you do find that our stuff, because we're a monthly release podcast, you're like, oh, what else can I be listening to? I'm like, oh, well, you might like League of Ultimate Questing, another Portland podcast. They're hilarious. So we're we're very friendly in that way.
What? And I guess this is the final question. You've gotten so much attention all of a sudden. How are you coping?
It's been weird. Like the morning of, I was like, so who do you think we got as our new person for the show? And I got like 2 Twitter responses. And, one person's like, they named another podcaster that we know. And I'm like, sorry. One person said, oh, was it me? Did I not? They're like, no, the person knows they're on the show. And then like immediately after, someone's like, it was Jeff Goldblum. And then all of a sudden it was over like 20 notifications every 5 minutes. And it's like, oh my gosh. And it's just myself and Caitlin trying to respond to all of this. It's been a bit of an exciting flood. And we are trying to personally respond to all of this and like correct some mild misinformation. Some articles put out like, oh, it's a first new season podcast from some guys in LA. And we're like, no, we're not LA. It's our 3rd year. We've been doing this for a while. We're indie. We're not with the network. You haven't heard of us because we're indie. So it's been a wild ride. So one of my favorite spoilers that I can give, because it's not a real one, is it's a quote from Balmur. It says, "Oh, I'm a single father, a man of many hats, a trapper on the side, a bit of a channeler of the gods, dabbler of the magnetically mystifying arts of magic. I also sometimes moonlight as a bard of sorts, but I won't test your patience with my cadence and predilection for preposterous poetry and rhythm." And it's just like, whoa.
Big Goldblum energy there.
So if that's spoiler-ish, but also that's just who he is. That's who Balmur is. Meet Balmur.
Can't wait for this episode. I think it's going to be fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you making the time.